In this video, I'll discuss which chapters I think will be adapted for Season 4 of Hajime no Ippo. And yes, I know it is obvious that the chapters that will be adapted are the ones after the third season ended. But this video is meant to serve as a guide for people who can't be bothered to read the manga and to build hype for the next season, which will probably never come out, honestly. So, let's discuss how many chapters will be adapted for the fourth season, and this will allow us to know the storyline in those chapters. So, in this segment of the video, you're going to see a lot of numbers, but don't let that frighten you. So, Season 2 of Hajime no Ippo had 26 episodes, and Season 3 had 25. I'm just gonna say Season 4 has 26 episodes, just so we can have one more episode to adapt more chapters. So, how many chapters did Season 2 and 3 of Hajime no Ippo adapt, respectively? So, Season 2 of Hajime no Ippo, or New Challenger, adapted chapters 315 through 399, 416 through 417, and 419 through 420, which adds up to 88 total chapters adapted. While Season 3 of Hajime no Ippo, or Rising, adapted chapters 503 through 504, 416 through 418, 422, 425 through 502, 505 through 508, 510 through 515, 519 through 557, and 400 through 414, which is a total of 146 chapters adapted. I always felt that the third season's pacing was a bit off, and the fact that they adapted 146 chapters in 25 episodes definitely explains why. But on average, each season adapted 117 chapters of the manga, which, even then, I feel like this is too many chapters to adapt in 26 episodes. It will leave the pacing feeling a bit rushed, kind of like the third season. However, I kind of think that this is the perfect amount of chapters to adapt for the fourth season of Hajime no Ippo. I mean, not as much happens in these chapters compared to the other ones, since Takamura literally had 2 world title fights in the previous 2 seasons. So I decided to adapt 109 chapters after the third season ended. So that means Season 4 of Hajime no Ippo would end at chapter 667, and only half of that chapter would be adapted. You'll see why when I get to that chapter. So, the third season of Hajime no Ippo ended with a flashback arc with Kamigawa and Nakoda. This arc happens after Takamura won his match with David Eagle. Obviously, this isn't how the manga happened, so I'm just gonna have to match the continuity of the anime and say the story begins here. So, Aoki basically becomes an advertisement for broccoli, getting the nickname Brocco Man since his head basically resembles a piece of broccoli. Which, if you don't remember why Aoki has a broccoli on his head, well, he lost a bet to Takamura, which was if he couldn't be his opponent Papaya Dichu, he would have to get the same haircut as his opponent. And from this point forward, this season will be very focused on Itagaki. Itagaki has a rematch coming up with Makino, who is the first person Itagaki fought and lost to. Itagaki and Ippo go see one of Makino's matches, and they find out that Makino has become a real threat to Itagaki. Makino not only spams flicker jabs the whole match on his opponent, but he constantly fouls as well. After Makino's match, Itagaki, Ippo, and Makino meet outside of the arena. Makino tells Itagaki that he better be careful to not slip up this time again. Makino acts like a menace, and Mai shows up to support Itagaki against Makino. Makino leaves, and the last thing he says is basically Ippo won't be able to ignore him for a request for a title match after he beats Itagaki. And so Itagaki asks for help with the only other person in the series who could do flicker jabs well, Mashiba. Of course, Mashiba normally wouldn't care about sparring anyone, but it isn't until Itagaki brings up Mashiba's little sister, Kumi. They then spar, and while the match isn't shown to us, when Ippo visits Itagaki to check up on his condition, he sees that Itagaki's face is all swollen after sparring Mashiba. We then get some development from Makino, and even though he doesn't get any recognition in the world of boxing, he will definitely leave his mark after fighting Itagaki. Itagaki managed to swell Mashiba's eye shortly after their spar. We then find out how even more dangerous Makino's flicker jabs are, and Itagaki ends up doing better and better against Mashiba as he receives less damage each time. Itagaki and Mashiba then go to a restaurant to talk about certain things. Kumi thought that Mashiba was going on a date with a girl, so she brought along Ippo, so they're just eavesdropping on whatever they're saying. And we truly get to see how much Mashiba really does care about his little sister, and we end up finding out that Ippo is the person that took away Itagaki's confidence. Before their fight, we get a lot of background on Itagaki and Makino. Their fight starts, and for the premise of this video, I'm just gonna say who wins in these matches. But Itagaki ends up annihilating Makino, and Makino can barely land a punch for the whole fight, which lasted 2 rounds. Amai then ends up fighting a guy called Tarai Makoto after Itagaki, and Amai wins. Takamura then leaves and goes on a trip until the Broccoman hype ends. And Ippo's next opponent, called Kurosawa Takuzu, is introduced, and Ippo says that he wants to try something new. We then end up finding out that Sanada is training Kurosawa, which, if you don't remember, Sanada is the guy Ippo fought after him and Sendo's rematch for the Japanese title. In order to prepare for this match, Ippo ends up hammering logs into the side of the riverbank with a mallet. He essentially is training like Coach Kamigawa in his prime, but just without the risks of breaking his whole hand. Ippo wants to use the basics against Kurosawa since Ippo feels that he's been relying on the Dempsey roll way too much. We get a lot of context on Takamura's trip, and he ends up returning home to watch Ippo's match with Kurosawa. Takamura then ends up bringing home some delicacies as souvenirs for everyone to try, and eating this is basically like a time bomb for your stomach. Takamura essentially gives Itagaki, Aoki, and Kimura diarrhea before Ippo's match with Kurosawa, but Aoki ends up getting it the worst when Takamura decides to do the 1000 years of death on him. Their fight starts, and obviously Ippo ends up winning this match. We then see the gap between Ippo and Itagaki, since if Itagaki was in Kurosawa's shoes, Itagaki would have done the same thing that led to Kurosawa losing the match, and we see that the log training Ippo did comes full circle. After Ippo's match with Kurosawa, Itagaki ends up bumping into Imai. They discuss the future of their careers and their potential fight. As they get heated up, Aoki steps in and interrupts the two of them. Aoki looks like a mummy, and as it turns out, he completely annihilated Korakuen Hall's bathroom. You can consider this the death of Broccoman, since when the press finds out that Aoki did this, his career as Broccoman will be over. We then see the return of Vorg into boxing, and he is fighting the IBF 4th ranked junior lightweight Eric Thompson. Vorg ends up winning this match and becomes the 4th ranked in the IBF junior lightweight. We then see the return of Umezawa after he left the Makunouchi fishing boat, and he won a manga award, so Ippo and Itagaki decide to visit him to congratulate him. The most important thing about this is that Umezawa tells Itagaki that Ippo sees himself as the challenger every time he fights, even though he is the Japanese featherweight champion. Ippo then ends up sparring with Itagaki to help Itagaki prepare for his match with Imai, since Imai basically fights like Ippo. During the spar, it looks like Itagaki completely dominated. Takamura then confronts Ippo about how, if the spar would have lasted another round, Ippo would have KO'd Itagaki. And because of this, Takamura seems very doubtful that Itagaki can beat Imai, since when Takamura is confronted by Itagaki about this, Takamura says that Itagaki lacks unpredictability. Before Itagaki and Imai's match starts, Takamura finds Miyata, and Takamura discusses with Miyata what would have happened if Miyata and Ippo would have fought at the end of the rookie finals, since Imai is a parallel to Ippo and Itagaki is a parallel to Miyata. Imai and Itagaki's fight starts, and I'm just going to skip to the outcome of the fight, since the fight does end up going the distance. But Itagaki ends up winning the fight with extreme difficulty, and he ended up winning while beating Imai at his own game, which is infighting. Hoshi is introduced, and he arrives with Sendo, and Hoshi proposes that if he beats Itagaki, then he gets to challenge Ippo for the Japanese featherweight title. At this point in time, the Kamigawa gym and Miyata's gym are both planning a fight for Ippo and Miyata, and Kamigawa says that this fight will be one for the world stage. Essentially, both boxers are ready to fight, and Ippo asks if he can relinquish his title. And essentially, Ippo and Miyata's fight is set to happen in spring after Miyata clears another title defense. Itagaki's in the hospital after fighting Imai, and Ippo visits him. They have a really cool heart-to-heart conversation, and eventually Imai shows up. Imai came to give Itagaki film on the Western Japan Rookie Finals to help Itagaki get prepared for his upcoming match against Hoshi. Itagaki is then released from the hospital, and Amai swears that next time he won't lose to Itagaki. We see Ippo driving for the first time, and he drives Itagaki to the Kamigawa gym. When Itagaki arrives to the Kamigawa gym, Shinoda tells Itagaki that they will be withdrawing from the Rookie Kings. After this, Ippo ends up giving the baton pass to Itagaki, the same baton pass that Date gave Ippo after his match with Ricardo Martinez. Ippo's next opponent is introduced, and his name is Take Keiichi. We get a lot of background on Take, and as it turns out, Take is the one boxer Date didn't want to fight for a title defense, and we find out that Take was originally supposed to fight Date for the Japanese featherweight title. Ippo realizes that he needs to focus on his current match instead of his match with Miyata that will happen later. Take does a lot of shenanigans before his fight with Ippo. Ippo and Take's fight starts, and Ippo ends up winning this match with very high difficulty. After the fight, Kamigawa announces Ippo's fight with Miyata publicly to the press. Fights are announced for Aoki, Kimura, and a title defense for Takamura. Ippo then decides to watch Miyata's next fight, and he is joined by Kumi, and Mashiba decides to join along too, and Miyata is currently ranked 5th in the WBC. Miyata has an OPBF title defense against a guy called Shei Zhanbong. Their fight starts, however, in the middle of the match, Miyata ends up seeing someone in the crowd, and this distracts him, and he ends up paying greatly for it. Miyata is forced to fight in a slugfest, and he ends up winning with extreme difficulty in the end, and he says that this was his worst match ever. After the match, Ippo is very excited because he knows that he will be able to fight Miyata very soon. However, in the locker room, Miyata's dad tells Miyata that the match with him and Ippo will be postponed because he knows that Miyata broke either one or both of his fists. So the match isn't cancelled, but it won't be happening when they originally thought. Miyata leaves the locker room to go on a walk, and he ends up bumping into the guy that he saw in the crowd. The guy then ends up approaching Miyata, and he tells Miyata that they were destined to meet, and Miyata cannot escape destiny. He ends up testing Miyata, and we find out that this guy is a boxer. Miyata's dad then ends up separating the two of them, and the guy leaves. We then see that Mr. Sakaguchi is the coach for this boxer. If you don't remember, Mr. Sakaguchi was the coach for Arnie Crocodile Gregory, who Miyata fought for the OPBF featherweight title. And ever since then, Mr. Sakaguchi has been pinning boxers up against Miyata to see if they can beat him. But Mr. Sakaguchi claims that it won't be long before Miyata is trapped in the Wheel of Destiny. So at the Kamigawa gym, Coach Kamigawa ends up telling Ippo that their plans with Miyata have changed. Coach Kamigawa tells Ippo that he got a call from Miyata's gym, and they said that Miyata fractured both of his fists. Miyata's gym also said that Ippo will be at the top of their priorities when both of Miyata's fists have healed. So the match isn't cancelled, but rather postponed. Ippo ends up walking to his house, and on his way home, all he could think about is his eventual fight with Miyata. He thinks about all the times him and Miyata were supposed to fight. And Ippo says that he'll be waiting for Miyata. This is where I think Season 4 of Hajime no Ippo should end, since it's a nice little somber moment, and it's honestly the only good stopping point for the season to end on. There are 2 chapters that I would really like to see adapted for the 4th season, since neither Season 1, 2, or 3 adapted them. The first chapter being chapter 290, in which Hayami fights Kobashi for the Japanese junior featherweight title. And the second one is chapter 509, in which Itagaki and Ippo watch Ricardo Martinez have a title defense on TV. I couldn't think of where to fit these chapters into the 4th season, since I feel like the pacing would have felt weird. But I just wanted to get that off my chest real quick. But this is the end of the video, and I would really like to hear what you thought of it in the comments down below. And on that note, this is Mex signing off. It's been real.